Welcome to Coffee and a Weather Map with Jeff. We have some things to talk about, so I've kind of changed up the way that I'm going to do things here today. And I'm experimenting with ways to cover more of Michigan, since I have a lot of friends and family that live in the Lower Peninsula, not just northern Lower Michigan, which is where I originally started when I was clandestinely podcasting years ago, doing northern Michigan recreational weather. Now we're going to not only do South Texas, which is relatively quiet right now, but we also are going to do the entire Lower Peninsula of Michigan. And with that, let's jump into it here and get things rolling. With the WWA map, the watch, warning, and advisory map that comes out of the Weather Service. This is as of 12:40 Zulu. Let's update the time. Should be now 13:08 Zulu. Just 2 minutes ago. You can kind of see things going on. A couple of places that we have been talking about here lately, which is the East Coast, still have flood watches in effect in Virginia, as that front / surface trough / moisture kind of starting to wash out a bit, so it's not raining quite as bad. Although there are still going to be issues coming up here over the next couple of days, and we'll get into that here in a bit. Then heat advisories that then start from basically the North Carolina border and go all the way south into Florida. And heat advisories are for temperature or heat indices over 105 for the south. If it's 105 north of pretty much that line, then we start running into excessive heat warnings, or extreme heat warnings, I should say. And that's what we've got going here in the center of the country. Kansas and Missouri are both having extreme heat warnings with heat indices that exceed 105, while south, Oklahoma and Arkansas have heat indices that exceed 105, but so those are the advisory areas. And then they do have an extreme heat warning there in northwestern or northeastern Arkansas, there around the Memphis area and the Boot Heel of Missouri. And that section is actually expected to exceed 110. We also see an area of dense fog down around the Dayton area and up around Columbus, that part of southwestern Ohio. There's a severe thunderstorm watch, and then there's a couple of warnings out in that area for an mesoscale convective system, a complex of thunderstorms that is moving through eastern Iowa at the moment. Up in the Boundary Waters and the Dakotas, we've got a dense fog advisory across most of that part of eastern North Dakota, as well as in northwestern Minnesota. However, there is an air quality alert due to Canadian fires just to the north, and that's probably a part of the fog problem as well. That air quality for the Canadian fires to the north across the northern part of Minnesota as well. There's a lake wind advisory out in Montana, eastern Montana, around the Fort Peck Lake. That's most of that area. And because it is breezy, there is still that red flag warning that's going on in eastern Idaho. Otherwise, air quality alerts around Colorado for regional wildfires there. Can't blame the Canadians on that one. Okay, moving ahead here, we'll go up to the latest. It's still the 9Z map, which was analyzed around 5 a.m. Eastern time or 4 a.m. Central time. You see that area, well, not area, but the stationary front that goes from off the Atlantic coast into the mid-Atlantic states. So right around northern Virginia, comes across the Delmarva Peninsula, through central West Virginia, into northern Kentucky, then curves north in southern Illinois into Iowa as a warm front, which is where all those thunderstorms are moving along. And then there's a cold front now, or at least a stationary front in Nebraska off of the low that's in southeastern South Dakota. And then the front follows up the front range of the Rocky Mountains into the north, where there is another system trying to move in, which, if we take a look, there is in the Pacific Northwest an 500 millibar trough, a area of low pressure moving in along the jet stream there into the Pacific Northwest. That kind of has a little bit of a reflection all the way down into Southern California, but that is still fairly weak. The one up along the jet has a little bit more energy, so that will be an issue coming later on. One thing to note, and I'll zoom in a little bit here on the Great Lakes, you can see that jet max of wind. And what we're looking at is this whole area that's south of that and to the west going back into Minnesota. That's what's known as the right rear quadrant of the jet. And the jet streak like this, that's your best uplift across the area. So areas that are just south of that as it moves across into New England later today, that helps to provide more uplift there in the state of Michigan, as well as Wisconsin and Illinois. And we will take a look at that here coming up in just a second when we go into our local forecasts, specifically to show the SPC idea. We can kind of look at all that here on the Tropical Tidbits satellite image. You can see that complex of thunderstorms right there in Iowa as it's trying to move down to the south and east. Otherwise, we have a fair amount of cloud cover that's covering in the state of Michigan. Some of it are thunderstorms, and SPC had put out a discussion on why a watch was unlikely, at least in northern Michigan, but there will still be a threat here later on today. Okay. Instead of doing the SPC WPC game here, I'm going to use WPC's map here of the significant weather areas. So the yellow ones are severe thunderstorms possible. So those are slight risks or better. And then the red is the slight risk or better of heavy rain flash flooding possible. So looking at that whole system that we were looking at 8 a.m., look at the map coming across. There's an area that front that starts off the East Coast and into the mid-Atlantic states and then back up into the upper Mississippi Valley that we've been talking about. Well, at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, which is 12Z, or 7 a.m. Central Daylight Time, there's that slight risk that goes all the way up into Michigan to about US 10, which is about where the area that we would be, anything downstate of that is in the slight risk today. There is a slight risk for heavy rain, and that in the mid-Mississippi Valley all the way back into Iowa, and then also further east and south into Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia and North Carolina. So pretty much the areas that we have seen over the last couple of days. And then just ahead of that warm front out in the west, that's along the front range of the Rockies, we're expecting to have a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from the Canadian border there in Montana all the way down through western North Dakota and South Dakota, and then into western Nebraska and a little bit of Kansas and Colorado. Okay, so now we're going to get to the local section. For those of you who don't want to hear the rest of it and who are in South Texas, my friends down there, we're looking at mid to upper 80s along the coastline again. We're going to have, and then as you get further in, you start getting temperatures 90 degrees in the inland portions of the coastal bend counties. And then as you get more into the coastal plains and the Victoria Crossroads, i.e. Victoria, Beeville, and Alice, you are looking to mid to upper 90s across the area. These are pretty typical for summertime temperatures in South Texas. There's no precipitation expected today. Temperatures will reach 100 or in at least from 100 to 105 out in the brush country, all the way out into the Rio Grande Plains near Laredo. As I said, we could have mid to upper 80s. So there the Beachcast says upper 80s for the high temperatures today along the coast. It'd be a good day to get out there on the coast if you have a chance. Probably going to be very busy along the Port A and into the Whitecap Beach down by Corpus Christi. Water temperatures are in the lower 80s, wave heights around 2 feet, so we have a low rip current risk at this point. Tonight, temperatures in the mid to 70s to right around 80 degrees all the way out to the coast. And looking at the 5-day outlook, we have 90s across the region with as high as 105 on each day through Thursday. And at this point, it looks like it's sunny to partly cloudy each day with no chances for rain. Just going to be hot and dry. And our low temperatures, 75 to 80 degrees for each night, all the way out into Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Okay, so to show what's going on here around Lower Michigan, it's a little bit more difficult. I've got a couple of offices, actually 3 offices to deal with in the Lower Peninsula: Gaylord, Grand Rapids, and Detroit. So I've pulled up the DESI NBM maps. So the high temperatures today in Michigan, for the Lower Peninsula specifically, we're running somewhere around the upper 60s right along the coast, especially up in the tip of the mitt, up there by the Mackinac Bridge and the Straits of Mackinac. You can see it actually gets to 71, though, up in Sault Ste. Marie in eastern upper Michigan. The further south you go, we're expecting temperatures today to be in the mid 70s. We're going to be close to 80 as you get further south, and then 85-ish in the southeastern part of the state going into Detroit and down there near the Ohio border. Precipitation-wise, however, through 8 p.m. tonight, there is a fair chance, yeah, 90% chance. So in this case, we would call that categorical in the Weather Service. So rain or showers and thunderstorms. There was no chance or likelies. This is what is expected over the next 12 hours. Now, if you notice at the top, it says probability of 12-hour precipitation greater than 1/100th of an inch. And that is the definition of POPs that we have always used in the Weather Service. As we've gotten better at timing things, then you start dividing it up by the hours, and that statistics kind of get a little wonky in there. But for the most part, this is where most of the rain is expected to be, and it'll be greater than 1/100th of an inch. The further south you go, it's still expected for the most part. It's categorical all the way down to almost the Grand Rapids area, and then you start getting into the likely territory. This being the first period of the forecast. So today we are looking at what we would call aerial coverage in this. So I would say showers and thunderstorms, and then downstate, numerous showers and thunderstorms, and then it'd be scattered showers and thunderstorms here through the day in the southeast, down around Detroit, and getting it down near Toledo on the Ohio border. If we jump ahead to tomorrow morning, so tonight's chances increase downstate, especially in the southeastern portion where it's expected to be numerous, as well as there south of I-96 in West Michigan as well. Kalamazoo's at 67% chance. It's a 45% chance, so things are decreasing. If you look up in northern Michigan, we're at a 5% chance when you get up there by Petoskey. Well, Bay Harbor is what that point says. Traverse City's at 5%, and then the tip of the mitt and all the way up into the UP, then we're below 5%. So really the rain should end sometime during the late afternoon, early evening hours for northern lower Michigan and start to scatter out by the evening there in lower Michigan, except towards the southeast where you'd expect a lot of it. Most of this rain that you're going to see here towards the end of this period is going to be probably from another convective complex of thunderstorms with the rain shield washing over that areas south of I-94 there. All right, to take a look at the severe threat, I pulled up the Michigan maps, and you can see its general forecast. The general thunderstorms are forecast for areas there, the tip of the mitt across the UP, but then further south as you get to Sheboygan to Escanaba line south of there. So that includes Gaylord, Alpena, Roscommon, Houghton Lake, Traverse City, Grayling, Manistee. Those areas are all in the marginal. So a severe thunderstorm can't be ruled out, at least at this point. And at this time, this map was just updated at 7:45 Central Time, would be 8:45 Eastern Time. The slight risk then goes right along pretty much where US 10 is. US 10 is a major US highway there that splits right there across roughly Saginaw to Ludington. So that line is pretty much there, which includes everything downstate, as we would say from those of us from northern lower Michigan. So that includes Grand Rapids, Mount Pleasant, Saginaw, Flint, Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Benton Harbor. Now, what are we concerned with the severe thunderstorms? The tornado outlook shows that there is a 2% chance or a 2 to 4% chance of a tornado occurring within 25 miles of a point. So low, but it is possible. It could be one or two there during the day, probably during the afternoon. And that could stretch anywhere from I-7, or not I-75, M72 there that runs from Traverse City over to Alcona County, so that northern extent that you see on the map, all the way south to the Indiana border and on out into the rest of the mid-Mississippi states. The big threat, however, is wind, straight line winds, and this is something that whenever I gave a talk that we would always stress in our severe weather talks would be that the biggest weather or severe weather maker that we have in Michigan, and northern Michigan specifically, was straight line winds. That was usually the cause of most of the damage. In this case, we've got a 5 to 14% chance there from kind of along M32. M32 is a little south of that, but for the most part, cutting across the northern part of the lower peninsula. The 15 to 29% chance, so the slight risk area that you see on the maps, that's one of the reasons why, is this area here, which it runs right along US 10, and south is for severe wind. That's the main issue for the day. Hail is a bit of an issue. I think this was just upgraded at 7:45 to include that there is a hail potential. It's only a 5 to 14% chance of hail, but it's still a chance for hail in some of these thunderstorms that run from the line that runs from right around the Sheboygan area all the way down to I think that's M37 or M46, one of those things down, one of those cross state highways that runs across the lower peninsula. So that area is the main threat for hail. All right, so looking ahead to the rest of the week in northern Michigan, temperatures are going to be mostly sunny to partly cloudy across the area. We do have another chance for showers and thunderstorms later on Wednesday. Otherwise, temperatures will be in the 70s across northern Michigan, probably 80s across southern lower Michigan. That brings us to the tropics. And I'll just make sure. Oh, yes, 7:34. That was the latest one. They are still watching this tropical wave that's out over the Atlantic. It's not expected. It's now a 20% chance that the next 7 days that it could form into a tropical cyclone or depression, and that's a 10% chance in the next 48 hours. Kind of looking at it here, we can see, and I'll zoom in on it right there, there is some rotation going on with it, so it wouldn't be surprising if it does get upgraded to a tropical depression. It doesn't look super organized, but it is organized nonetheless, and so we'll see how that goes. At this point, I was trying to track down these maps, and I was kind of poo-pooing the whole idea of something coming out during the next week or so. I finally found the maps that people were pointing to, and it happens to be the European ensemble. And at this point, besides this one, there does look like there's a chance. Well, let's see, today is the 19th. So within the next 2 days, there's a 10% chance and there's a 20% chance. And that's where this comes into play. The European is starting to show, let's see, let me pull up a 50 to 60% chance in some of those areas that a tropical cyclone. Now, a cyclone could mean anything from a depression all the way up to a hurricane. In this case, it looks like it would be a depression coming through that area starting on the 22nd. And it would move across on the 23rd. And then we have to watch out for another wave coming off Africa. That is expected to, the percentages start to fall off. We'll talk about the U.S. here in a bit. As it gets closer to the Lesser Antilles. And then you've got that other wave coming off of Africa, which looks like it tries to ramp up, and then it starts to fall apart. And then the one in the west there, getting into the Caribbean Sea, looks like it is going to fall apart as well. At least that's what the European ensembles are saying. Okay, let's back up a little bit. One of the reasons I was in search of these maps was for the U.S. strike possibilities with these tropical cyclones. And if we follow this one through, we're not expecting anything, at least at this point. I'm not sure what that blob on the second is for tropical strike of a cyclone there in the Carolinas. But what we do see is somewhere after next Wednesday, there's another one of those homegrown. So the front comes off and stalls. It looks like around Georgia, northern Florida, the northeastern Gulf. That's the main concern. There is one that is expected, and I've seen that. I was seeing that forms off of part of it is that the front stalls, and then a low tries to spin up from all the thunderstorms along there, and it's not a front. It's actually considered at least some sort of subtropical depression or a tropical depression. It probably will have tropical characteristics by this time. The water is warm enough out there that it would spin up, but it would continue off to the east out into the open waters, so not an issue for the U.S. However, what is, if you notice this one that I was talking about in Florida and Georgia, that it starts to continue to move east right along the coast into Louisiana and before it falls apart. Now, one of the things that I have noticed too is that this one tries to stretch a little bit further south in its probabilities. Remember, the red is only a 10 to 20% chance of a strike probability, and what they determine that is that the center of the low passes within 300 kilometers. So, roughly 180 miles-ish, 200 miles of an area, of a point. So bear that in mind. We'll see how this goes. If you actually change this from cyclones to tropical storms for the same time, you see very low percentages. At least at this point, the European ensembles are not big on anything. In fact, that's a 5 to 10% chance that gets in there. So it would be something similar to with what we just had with 93 Invest 93L. Never really got to tropical or depression level. It just was a big mass of thunderstorms that kept moving and had the potential to try to do something, but it could never get its act together. In this case, it continues on, and then everything kind of washes out. And then it looks like we get another front that comes off the East Coast and tries to do some more homegrown, as a friend of mine would say at the Gaylord office, nonsense. And you also notice that each wave has the potential now of producing some sort of tropical depression out over the Atlantic in the main development region. I will also note that, and I think, let's see if I can change, we can change oceans here. Eastern Pacific. The Eastern Pacific at this time does quite a lot. It has its stuff, I don't know, even in the Central Pacific, although things tend to fall apart usually before they get to Hawaii. They don't usually get a whole lot up that way. But the Eastern Pacific is active. And what I did notice on the MJO report is that as we get towards the end of the month, we are looking at the likelihood of the oscillation wave to be at least somewhere in the Pacific. So it's not surprising, at least at this point. Now, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some sort of Kelvin wave, and that gets a little bit more into the theoretical stuff, but there are Kelvin waves, as they call them, that move across the Earth there along the equator, and they too will cause precipitation. They're a little bit harder. You can track them. They're a little bit harder to get them a handle on. At least it looks like, from what I've been able to read about them. Okay, so one last piece of information to kind of show you what's going on here. This is for the 26th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time or 7 a.m. Central Time. This is the Google Weather Lab Cyclone AI DeepMind model. I stopped it here, and this shows some of the same things that we were talking about. There's the one that's out in the Atlantic, and the European is the orange dots. It's all over the place. The green one is their previous model, that is the Google Weather Lab DeepMind project. And any purple would be its ensemble, and its ensemble doesn't show anything. But the green deterministic one does show a few things. It does show something on the 26th that has moved, and if we actually backtrack it a bit, you can see it forms around off the Georgia, South Carolina coast. Then the movement goes into the Gulf, and this is all the European in orange. Then by the 25th at 8 a.m., then the experimental model shows something, and the European has got things all over the place. And by the 27th, everything is back onshore or has fallen apart. And there is something, at least, that, there is that little bit that just keeps trying to chug along. This thing has not been, the European is the one that's been showing the most in the main development region with these waves. And so there is a possibility of getting something in there. And then later on by the 31st, then we're starting to show blue dots and green dots, which are their experimental model and the next generation model that they have already been fielding. And that moves through. But even then, you've only got 2 or 3 ensemble members going through as it goes out into early August. But nothing else there. If you look out in the Eastern Pacific, that's where most of the action happens. Right now, that's where the warmest water is. And that's where the best, climatologically, that's where the best action usually happens. So with that, coming to a close, hopefully this has worked out better than I have expected. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, trying to get some of the stuff up front a little bit sooner into it so that people don't have to wait through a good portion of the forecast, all the different things before I go and do the local forecast, especially since we have more things that could happen here. If things are, for me, don't look like they're too busy, so my guess is that if there is a severe weather threat, we might jump on here and try to do live. I have done live when I was in South Texas back in May, so we'll see how that goes. I have not done that in a while, but since I know how to use this system that I'm using on my tablet, I think maybe we can get away with it. All right, and with that, take care and have a safe day.